Hello and welcome again to the Augmented Society Network and to our contributors for the Creativity Offers a New Formula for Life. I would like to welcome Brent Holmes, a Las Vegas resident, and my co-lead, of course, Julie Samuels. We'll be talking to Brent about his work, his influences, and at this point, I'm going to hand to Julie, who will take us into the interview. Welcome both.
Hi, Brent. Could you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, Zoe. Hi, Julie. A little bit about myself. Sure. I am a 21-year resident of the Las Vegas Valley here in Southern Nevada. I have previously lived all over the country, mostly East and West Coast, California, New Jersey. I am a lifelong artist, a lifelong learner, and what would be commonly referred to as an autodidact. So somebody that really spends a lot of time in self-learning. I'm not always brilliant with the institutional stuff, but I do work and play with institutions well under certain circumstances.
And obviously, I need to ask your love of horses, because I like horses myself. Tell me how that started.
I love horses. They're the best. They're adorable and they're wonderful. And here in Nevada, I really love our wild horses. We have some incredible horses living in and around the Mount Charleston base and up in the hills, and you can ride up almost any time in the summer or springtime, and you can watch all the little foals and horses kind of ride around, and it's very scenic and very Western. And that's the focus of a lot of my work, is the notion of Western identity and the ideas that came with America's kind of second great foundational act, which was the expansion westward, or manifest destiny.
Because what I love the idea, see, people said, when I horse ride, and people are like, oh, the black woman on a horse. And what I love is that there's you, the black guy, on the horse. So to tell me, because most people think, oh, that's not what we do, but it is what we do.
This is really interesting to me, Julie, because the idea that Blackness can't do everything everywhere all the time is obscene and absurd, right? And
exactly.
When it comes in regards to kind of the Western mythos, but also our relationship with horses, you can go right now, I believe, to the British Museum and see a Yoruban horseback riding sculpture from pre-colonial Nigeria, as we would refer to it now. So the idea that people of the African diaspora don't ride horses is ridiculous, right? I mean, and if we can't prove it wrong, I think Beyonce's got something to say about it too. So
yeah, thank you. And that's the thing, I know. People always like say, oh, you ride horses. Like, well, yeah, I do. That's so that's what I love about your images, as you in the sand, as you in your author, as you kind of chowing down on your food. It's really, really kind of strong, and the presence is really, really felt. And I think that's absolutely fantastic.
Within that work, it was really important for me to establish a sense of place and self as a dialogue about both the individual in a more universal sense, but myself as a person of African descent and how my identity functions within the trappings of the American West. What, in America, and I think outside of the United States, certainly in Western Europe, the conversation about melanated people, the people of the global majority, Black and brown people, and their relationship with nature, their relationship with rurality is kind of stifled, right? Especially in the United States, where rurality, small isolated locations, the wilderness, nature in general, is something that's not thought of as possessed by people of color. And it's often viewed as this very Eurocentric space, which is insane. Right? It's the wilderness. It's the outdoors. We are human beings. And before human beings, we are animals, right? Part of the animal kingdom, like every other creature on the earth. So that because of your racial or ethnic background, you have to exist within an urban environment. And I do exist in an urban environment, certainly, but because of that background, that's where you're supposed to be, right? Where your body is supposed to take up space is one, blatantly wrong, two, deeply kind of colonial in all the worst ways, and three, it doesn't jive with any actual narrative history that human beings possess. Black people rode horses, Black people ranched cattle, Black people camped, they lived in the wilderness. And if you want to have a very real conversation about it, Black people are the people that got set out to tame a great percentage of wilderness under chattel slavery, by farming, by developing ranches, by cattle herding. They were the people sent out to do the riskier jobs, not the people sitting in houses, not the people enjoying luxury and peace, which is usually being housed, right?
Definitely.
So when I started making those images, when I was developing that work, it was an internal dialogue about the transformative process that occurs when a person thoroughly engages nature and thoroughly engages themselves. But it was also a dialogue about where my body is allowed to be and what kind of space I'm allowed to take up, based on the really truly arbitrary racial and cultural identifiers that have been put on me by a system that I never asked to be part of.
Amen to that.
So I think, yeah, I'm fascinated by the images and just how striking they are. Now they're from stills. Some of the ones that we're featuring are actually from some film work that you did, which I've been watching. I wondered about the choice of the word, and I don't think I'm saying it right, but lariat.
Lariat.
And the significance of that and why you chose that.
Well, a lariat is kind of a specific kind of rope used in, in ranching. It's used for roping cattle. It's used for tying down objects. It's used for multiple different ways of fastening, adhering, and attaching things. And the idea of the lariat in that work is that I'm roping myself into situations, into emotional states, into landscape, into place, into identity in specific ways, and tying myself to those things, much like a cowboy would with his rope. So, a lariat, a lasso, a rope, they all mean principally the same thing within specific contexts. But I love the word lariat, and I actually chose that name based on some early 20th century writing by African American cowboys. So,
and the imagery of you literally as part of the sandscape, which is one of our feature pieces. I mean, I just looked at that and just I actually felt that work and that shot, and I'm very excited about seeing it actually for real, even though it's it's a still, but it's such a compelling image. How did you pick that?
I was in many ways processing a certain amount of personal turmoil, questions about identity, issues of grief, and issues and concepts surrounding transformation. And I was looking at transformative practices within human cultural history. And one of the big ones that I think is not talked about, maybe in, more egalitarian social circles, is burial, communal burial or self-burial, where they will take a human being alive. This is traditional in multitude of tribal cultures between Africa and the Americas, and they will, to a certain extent, bury a person. as a physical and metaphoric dialogue about their transformation or rebirth. Just as we extend out of the womb, the earth is inherently all of humanity's womb, and to be placed into it is an important and specialized transformative practice. I also really was in that film, in Lariat, talking about my relationship with landscape and becoming part of landscape. When we talk about Western expansion, when we talk about visual notions of manifest destiny, we have to remember that there is an entire legacy of settler colonial propaganda created as art in order to spur people from all around the world into engaging in the expansion of what we would refer to as the American West. The cowboy era of America is only really a 50-year-long era. It's typically depicted as being white oriented, as being masculine, as being radically independent. None of those things are true, of course. 25% of all cowboys were Black, 35% of all cowboys were of indigenous or Latinx descent, which leaves you with a really large number of people of color that are settling and working in these jobs. That said, that history is pretty deeply obfuscated. It's not the highlight of the history, and it's certainly not the media representation, because the cowboy comes to mean something very different at the beginning of the 20th century, right? And dialogues around this icon, right? The cowboy is the white knight of American history. It is, if you go to any other country in the world and you say, I'm from America, there's at least a 30% chance they're going to go, oh, cowboy, right? Like, that's part of our primary cultural identifier.
Yeah.
So when we talk about images of the West, and one of the things I was also really juggling and working with was the notion of the sublime, and the sublime in this definition, from a more art historical standpoint, we're talking about something that is both incredibly beautiful and awe-inspiring and terrifying simultaneously. And you can find these in older visualized works in kind of the European modality, in religious paintings and depictions, right? Depictions of Christian mythos. But then you come over, the foundation of the United States occurs, the Civil War and slavery ostensibly, and we have this moment of westward expansion, and that is our cowboy era. It is literally the demarcation of the end of the Civil War, right? It's the end of chattel slavery, and that begins these epic landscape paintings, these paintings and depictions of what we can refer to art historically as the sublime, in a very different sense, a non-religious, secular, landscape-based sublime imagery or codex that's being generated. And when we talk to ourselves about those notions, the desert comes up so frequently as something that's depicted. It's the same reason we have the land art movement out here, right? There's multiple ways in which the desert is interpreted and processed as sublime, because it is both blank canvas and deadly wilderness at the same time, and exceptionally beautiful. And so I was attempting to insert those aspects or elements of the sublime as a dialogue with historical depictions of the desert, but also with my own relationship with that fear, that precarity, that idea. And I felt that burying myself was one of the better ways to incorporate myself into that landscape in a very literal sense, right? In a very physical way, I was there as part of landscape. As an aside, it's actually really funny, because those sand dunes are these very well-known red sand dunes near a place called Valley of Fire, and they're mostly used by ATVers on the weekends. So as I'm digging and doing this film and burying myself, I have my friend Heidi Ryder, who's a brilliant artist in her own right, as the camera operator, and I'm like, just if you hear an ATV, like, tell me, because I was burying myself in a sand dune that they could gladly just like, we're going to jump this sand dune and would not be able to see me from the other side. So there was genuine, like, me going, I hope I don't get run over by some guy on his little putt machine, right?
Wow. Yes,
Wow.
that's yeah, incredibly real and in that moment as well. And I'm fascinated by your comments about the sublime, which is one of the sort of main differentiators between fine art and craft as well. Although
Definitely.
it does kind of go across. So why does Brent Holmes, why are you and why do you express this way? What is it that made you an artist, a thinker, a maker? Why'd you do it, Brent?
Wow.
No
I mean,
pressure.
yeah, no, there is no pressure in that question. It's just a very complicated one. If I wanted to be very glib and joking, I'd be like, I don't know, persistent mental illness, maybe a little side of some neurodivergent, right? But when we take the subject more seriously, I'm not one for broad spiritualism or terminology that gives us kind of nebulous universalist ideas, but I would say that it's a calling and it exists in all people, I think, but I think it exists more loudly in some than others. I cannot be alive without being creative. My friend refers to it as the bug, right? I can't function. I don't function well without being able to dedicate a solid amount of my time to my creative process and expounding ideas and processing them. And I believe it's partially emotional and, partially psychological, but at the end of the day, it's all a call. And I don't want to be glib with that notion, but it is a sound or a voice that lives inside of me that tells me that this is what you have to do. And I get very dysregulated if I'm not engaging in some form of creativity, frequently and relatively intensively. The better question I would say is, why do I choose to share it with other people? And that's to me the better question. I know why I do it. I think I know why every artist does it. And I think it's because art is a dramatic aspect of self-soothing. It is a way to engage consciousness. It is an exploration of interior landscapes. It is something that you process and bring in to yourself. And it's a transmaterial activity, right? The great English writer Alan Moore famously stated that human beings are amphibious, and what he meant by that is that we live in a physical three-dimensional world, right, or four-dimensional world, whatever, but we bring things from here, a non-place, right, a place with only certain material aspects. We generate them here and we bring them into that space. We come out of the water and onto dry land, and then we bring the things from a less hospitable environment back into this kind of wet world that we live in, or vice versa, if you would like, right? And I really took that statement to heart. That always made sense to me. So why do I share my concepts and ideas with the world? And that's twofold. I'm mildly egocentric, and I won't lie about that. But I also think that I refer to my work frequently as a dialogue, because what I'm trying to do is be conversant with other people about the ideas that are at the front of my mind, and they take, long processes, right? These are long processed ideas. If you're working on a painting, building a sculpture, shooting a video, and editing it together, these are weeks, days, months at a time that you're engaging with this process. So the ideation has a really, really long arc. And it's not just oh, I was thinking this. Oh, well, what do you think about that? And then call and response in conversant like that. It is, here is a relatively lengthy and well-stated series of notes. I would love to see your reaction to them, your thoughts on them, your feelings about them. And it also, in many ways, when it comes to the arts, it's nonverbal. Verbosity is wonderful. Words are wonderful. I write, I speak frequently, and I'm relatively adept at it. But there are so many places in which words fail to both depict and grasp the breadth and width of what we would refer to as the human experience. So it's another tool that's allocated in creating dialogues.
Fantastic.
It's wonderful. When I looked at your images, I thought, I suddenly started to think about my own identity, and the kind of the I did some reading about the ideas, the history of the kind of the narratives around the idea of what a cowboy is, and it kind of got me thinking about lots of things that I hadn't thought about. And I thought, you know what, I could actually see myself in those images because I love horses, and when I can, I ride as well. But there was some wonderful connections. And for me, it was, I started to have conversations with my son about the idea of, of what the idea of a cowboy and the history and the legacy, some wonderful conversations that we've had through looking at your images. So thank you for that. First of all, it's been wonderful. Yeah, wonderful. And some great conversations that we will continue to have.
Yeah, thank you so much, Brent. That's absolutely brilliant. Thank you for taking part, and we will look forward to hopefully exposing your work to more people. Thank you very much indeed.
You guys have generated an incredible exhibition. It's really, really wonderful to see the group of artists and see the concepts and ideas you're working with. And I really appreciate the both of you and what you're doing. And I can't wait to work more with you guys. Okay. So thanks for having me.
Pleasure.